Thank you so much for tuning in to our workshop today on Intro to Malware Analysis, hosted by Flatiron School and SecureSet Academy. We are very glad that you decided to spend part of your morning, afternoon, evening, very late night with us, learning a little bit more about the in-demand field of cybersecurity. I'm Jordan. I work on the marketing team here at Flatiron School. I will be working behind the scenes tonight while you learn from Syed, who is one of our awesome cybersecurity engineering instructors. Before I hand it off to him, here is our agenda for the evening. So we're going to start with just a quick overview about Flatiron School for our new friends on the line, and we will end with an audience Q&A and next steps. So throughout Syed's presentation this evening, feel free to drop any questions you have in the Q&A box or the chat, and we're going to get to as many as we can at the very end. We're happy to answer questions about, this specific topic, malware analysis. We are also happy to answer questions about what it's like to study at Flatiron School, which, speaking of, so Flatiron School is an award-winning boot camp that has helped thousands of graduates break into tech and land jobs they love. We were founded in 2012 in New York City and we're one of the oldest running boot camps. We believe that education is the best investment that you can make for your future. So we're committed to helping you learn the skills you need to change yours for the better, which is our mission statement, which is shown here. We currently offer career-changing courses in software engineering, data science, cybersecurity, and product design with flexible pacing options. We have campuses in the cities that are listed here. If you're in Colorado, you may be more familiar with our sister school, SecureSet, which has campuses in Colorado Springs and Denver. We believe that our true differentiator is our proven job search framework, which has helped thousands of our graduates break into the tech industry and land jobs at, see if it will go, there we go, companies like these and many, many more. We believe that the best boot camps get graduates jobs and are happy to prove it. Our 2020 jobs report is a third-party verified document and is available on our website in full. But here is a quick peek of those steps. So now I'm going to hand it off to your fearless leader, Syed, to get what you came here for. But a bit of housekeeping before we go. You will receive a copy of this recording and a copy of the slides tomorrow morning. I'll send it as a recap. Don't forget to drop your questions into the chat or Q&A boxes, and we will get to as many as we can at the end of the presentation. With that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and let Syed take the wheel.
Awesome. All right, let me share my screen. All right, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Shoot. All right, awesome. Well, hello everyone. My name is Alsayyed Hussain, and I am an instructor here at Flatiron School. Thank you everyone for joining in from literally all across the world, from all different time zones. So it's pretty late or pretty early for certain people. So I really appreciate you joining in. Today we're going to talk about just an introduction to malware analysis, specifically within cybersecurity. Malware analysis is definitely a pretty tough topic to discuss, especially because you can go really in depth. So in today's session, I want to give you a really strong introduction to it, just so you can have a good understanding of what it is, how it works, how teams use it, and so on. And then kind of like, my main goal here is to actually do like a second installment where today we're going to go over like fundamentals and like theory, and maybe we'll do like a second webinar sometime in the future where I can maybe do like a live kind of like a full live simulation of executing a malware in an environment and doing analysis of it. So that's kind of like the goal. But really, just in terms of the introduction, we'll go into that today. So really quickly, just a bit about myself. I have a Bachelor's of Science degree in Information Systems and Computer Science, and I concentrated in cybersecurity, early on in my academic career. And then now I have a little over 5 years of experience working in the cybersecurity field. And like I mentioned, I'm currently an instructor at Flatiron School for the cybersecurity engineering program. And I'm also a malware research engineer at Amazon on their threat intelligence team. I currently hold some certifications within cybersecurity and IT. And then I also love baking desserts because I'm a mega sweet tooth. I love playing basketball. I love watching basketball as well. And I love modifying and racing cars safely. So that's just a bit about myself, just so you can get to know me a little bit. And I really wish we can do intros with all of you, but we have like a lot of people in this call today, so that might take up a little too much time. So we'll kind of save that for another time soon. All right. Now, in order to understand malware analysis, of course, we have to know what malware is. All right. So malware, and there's so many different ways to define it. This is a pretty good definition we came up with. It's a term used to describe malicious software. So malware, malicious software, that can cause any type of damage, and it can disrupt the normal use of electronic devices. And malware can allow unauthorized access to systems or networks. It can utilize system resources. It can steal passwords. It can cause breaches. It just locks you out of view. So definitely a pretty destructive piece of code. There's, awesome programs that can be written to do great things, and all different apps and out there. But then you can also use that same programming and code to do very destructive things. And an example of a pretty destructive thing that happened in 2010 was a worm called Stuxnet. And a worm is a type of malware. We're going to go over all this very soon, but I want to set the stage here. So there was an incident in Iran in 2010. Basically, Stuxnet, which was a worm, entered systems via a USB stick at a nuclear facility that infected all of the Windows machines. And basically, it avoided detection through various means. Because a worm does not need human intervention, it automatically traveled across the network and was designed to check for control line systems which control the nuclear centrifuges in the nuclear facility. So basically, it exploited a vulnerability, and long story short, it took control of centrifuges in the nuclear facility, causing them to rotate at uncontrollable speeds and destroyed them. So this is a malware based off of code that was actually able to cause physical hardware damage and actually threaten the lives of people who are working in the nuclear facility. So we're talking about some pretty destructive things here, and this is only one of the hundreds or maybe even thousands of examples of various malware that's written by various malicious individuals and are deployed across organizations or against other individuals. And I'm pretty sure a lot of you on this call have dealt with some form of malware in the past. So definitely something important to talk about. And so now that we discussed what malware is, I want to quickly do an overview of the different types of malware. There's so many different types of malware, of course, and I wanted to cover some of the main ones. So, and a lot of these are probably terms you've heard of because, again, all of you are probably dealing with malware a lot more than you think, because we're all on the internet. We're all, going through web pages, opening up applications, and so on. So, first, there's a virus. A a virus, the main thing to understand here is that it requires human intervention in order to run and to propagate. And there's different types of viruses. There's file viruses, macro viruses, master boot record viruses. I mean, those are pretty crazy because they actually permanently affect the boot record when you're trying to boot up your operating system on your laptop, for example. And honestly, if the virus is able to get there and it can change certain things and actually, render your system useless. So that's just one example, but all different types of viruses. I mean, polymorphic viruses, they're constantly changing to avoid detection. They're changing their own signatures so that antivirus systems cannot find them, or intrusion detection systems and so on cannot find them. There's stealth viruses that hide under legitimate files or resources. So definitely lots of different ways that viruses can come about. Another one I'm sure you've heard of is a Trojan. This is based off of the Trojan horse story from, I believe that's Greek mythology. Yeah, that's not my field, but okay. So a Trojan is malware hiding in other legitimate files. Okay, so legitimate files and software are bundled with malware so that when the software is installed, it looks like it's benign, it looks like it's totally okay, and then malware is also executed because it was hiding there. So we have remote access Trojans, we have data sending Trojans, destructive Trojans, security software disabler Trojans. Those are pretty crazy because basically it disables your system and firewall, antivirus, so that other malicious files can be downloaded without getting detected, without being seen. So lots of really destructive things that these different Trojans can do. Some other categories, we have a backdoor. Basically allows attacker to control the system without being detected. And actually think of it as an actual backdoor. They can come in and out of the system whenever they want. It's very difficult to detect that. There's a botnet. Basically, it's a way all infected devices. So a botnet can comprise of all types of machines or iPhones or IoT devices and smart fridges that have all been infected in some way. And then the threat actor group that did infect them, or the malicious individual that infected them, uses all of them together and all their processing power through something called a command and control server. Basically, it's one center of command, and they're able to basically take full control of all these different, maybe hundreds or thousands of different malicious devices, use their processing power to perform major attacks or deploy malware on a very large scale. There's also downloaders, basically malicious code that exists only to download other malicious code. There's launchers, there's information stealing malware, so like sniffers or keyloggers. Keyloggers are basically malware that's deployed on your system, and literally all it does is report back on every single keyboard click that you make. So that's, of course, definitely a great way to get usernames, passwords, and so on. Then we have worms. Like I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, a worm does not require human intervention to propagate. We have spam. You all know what spam is. Basically malware packed into emails and attachments. And through that spam, that's where like phishing attacks happen, where you click on a malicious link or open up a malicious file. And that is where malware is deployed. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We also have ransomware. Again, probably a term you've heard of very recently. There's tons of ransomware attacks by some really evil gangs out there. There's one specific gang called Revil, R-E-V-I-L. They were prominent and they were in hiding for a while, and they're back live again, and we don't know what they're going to do. So that's, everything happening on the ransomware side, but basically it's encrypting the system completely and asks the user for ransom to decrypt the data. And sometimes if, for example, a major organization gets a ransomware attack, these malicious individuals can ask for millions of dollars for ransom. And actually, sometimes they don't even decrypt the data after the ransom is paid. So definitely a pretty destructive attack. There's rootkits. These are extremely hard to detect and impossible to remove without reformatting the system, because it's basically has root access to your entire machine. There's adware, so it generates unnecessary advertisements on your system and your web pages. And then there's spyware, sits on your system like a spy and monitors, records all of your activities and keystrokes, and even malware that can turn on your webcam and get your face or your background. I mean, all kinds of crazy things that these malicious programs can do. So lots of different types of malware out there. And then another thing to think about is mass versus targeted malware. So mass malware is intended to infect literally as many machines as possible and as many types of machines as possible. And this is something that we see the most. It's not targeted to one specific individual or one specific machine. It's just literally beaconed out and blasted out, and to see what they're able to get and who they're able to infect. Then there's targeted malware, tailored to a specific target, whether it's a specific company, it's a specific individual, specific group, a specific machine within the company. I mean, it could get very, very targeted that way. These are very difficult to detect, prevent, and remove. Requires a lot more advanced analysis. And an example of this is, of course, Stuxnet, which we discussed in the beginning. So what's malware analysis? Okay, so we discussed what malware is. We discussed the types of malware. So malware analysis is literally just dissecting the malware to understand how it works, what it can do, or what it did, how to identify it on a network or a system, or ways to detect it really, and how do you eliminate it, and then how do you make the measures to protect against it. That is what malware analysis is. And I mean, bring it down to those 5 simple questions feels pretty easy, but these are some pretty, you can go really in depth in trying to answer these questions for a piece of malware. So the importance of malware analysis, before we get into the different types of analysis and go further, malware is an integral part of many security breaches. We mentioned one breach. There's hundreds or thousands of breaches. There was a major Twitch breach last week, just last week, and that's a major breach of information. But malware is a critical part of many security breaches. Sometimes you don't need malware in a breach, but other times malware is going to be completely necessary for these malicious actors to become successful in their attempts. Organizations struggle to understand the malware they encounter. So let's say there's a malware on the system. You need malware researchers and people who understand malware or malicious code in order to have a full understanding of what happened, really. And knowing how to analyze the malware can bring an element of control into a pretty chaotic environment when you're in the middle of any type of security incident. So if, for example, you're just hit with a major ransomware attack, if you understand what ransomware is, you understand how to analyze it, sometimes it can bring some pretty good control, and you can actually take over control versus the threat actor taking control of you. Now, the goals of malware analysis, basically you want to identify the behavior and characteristics of the malware. In this case, we're going to say malware specimens, because that's each malware sample, we call them specimens, and basically we're doing a full analysis of that specific specimen. We can understand what actions it took or it can take on systems and networks, and we can even understand who is potentially behind it, or at least make a hypothesis, you know, on who's actually behind this malware, or who wrote it.
We're gonna give him just a second to hop back on. Gotta love technology.
Hey everyone, sorry about that. I briefly lost Wi-Fi. You guys can hear me, right?
Yes, yeah, we
Okay,
can.
cool. Sorry about that. All right, let me just share my screen again. Okay, cool. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Thank you, Jordan. All right. So to go back, basically we have our indicators of compromise that we can pull, and then we also have, honestly, the goal of malware analysis is sometimes literally just curiosity, or just experimentation, or trying to explore new things. So anyone can do it, and that's what I want to talk about in today's session. I'm hoping by the end of today's session, you can put together your own mini malware analysis lab. We'll go over ways to do that, and then you can literally start just out of curiosity. So that's going to be fun. Now, general rules for malware analysis: do not get caught in the details, because malware is very, very what's a good word? It is um, it is complex, for lack of a better word, and so there's so many various aspects to it that you have to understand. Maybe it's not very important that you are looking at this in your analysis, and there's certain things that you can maybe skip over, so you cannot understand 100% of the code, and focus on key features. Try several tools. Okay, there's many tools we're going to talk about in today's session. Sometimes a tool will fail miserably, and then you switch to another very similar tool, and it does the job that you need. And then don't get stuck on a hard issue. Just continue trying and moving along, and you'll put together the patterns. And malware authors are constantly raising the bar. They're constantly improving their own skills. They're evolving. So that means we must constantly evolve ourselves, and evolve our analysis methodology in the way that we're actually going about the malware research. And one thing to note, I know I keep mentioning code and programming and so on. One thing to note, you do not have to be a software developer or know how to code from scratch, or write lines and lines of code in all different languages in order to um, conduct malware analysis and to be a pretty good malware researcher. As a matter of fact, I mean, personally, up to this day, I'm not a developer. I'm not a very strong coder in any way when it comes to all different types of programming languages. The main thing you have to understand in malware analysis is you are not writing code from scratch. Basically, you are analyzing certain lines of code and looking for certain indicators, and looking for certain, we're going to go over it very soon, but looking for certain like API calls or strings, or even small snippets of code that you know are malicious, or are telling the malware to do certain bad things. So you do not have to be a programmer in order to do this. You can actually have no programming experience at all, and you can actually pick this up, pretty well. So malware analysis techniques. We're going to discuss two of the main techniques. So we have static analysis. Now this goes into reverse engineering malicious code from scratch. Okay, this is a little more tough task, because of course it's going to require you to understand understand some code. You have to understand what is good code and what is malicious code. You're going to have to kind of put those things together. So it's going to require some experience. Again, something you can definitely learn, even if you do not have any software development experience. And also, basically with static analysis, you are not executing or detonating the malware anywhere. You're simply uploading the malware into a debugger or a disassembler. These are different tools that you can actually look line by line on the code, and then look out for various things that might look alarming or threatening. We're going to go over very soon some of the things that you could look out for, but there's API calls, there's secret messages you can see in various through static analysis. Malware authors use Morse code all the time. They do all kinds of things to deter an analyst. So they, put garbage code in there, or they write a bunch of, nonsensical characters to make you think about what this is, but really it's just distracting you from something else within the code. So all kinds of different techniques that you'll learn over time. But another thing that's pretty difficult about this is it's pretty hard to just get malware executable samples in general. I mean, in organizations, it's a lot easier if you're within a security team. A lot of security teams have like malware specimens that you can interact with and explore. But for independent researchers, it's a little difficult. Of course, there are still ways though. And so some static analysis tools, there's for looking at malicious executables, there's Ghidra, there's IDA Pro, and Ollie Debug. Okay, these are three really strong debuggers. Just like this last slide, this is showing IDA Pro. This is literally showing the programming. It's uploading the malware sample, so you can look at the code, and basically it is translating the code from the coding language. So there's Python, there's Java, there's C#, C++, and it translates that to something called assembly language. And then through assembly language, you can look at all the different instructions and strings, and that's where you can do the analysis. So Ghidra, IDA Pro, Ollie Debug, these are three different debuggers that you can use to basically do the same thing. Or if you're analyzing a malicious document, so not an executable file, but a document, so like a PDF doc or a Word doc or an Excel doc, then there's other tools that you can do to do an analysis of anything, looking out for anything malicious within that document. So there's something called SpiderMonkey, there's PDF parser if you're looking at PDFs, there's CScript if you want to decode malicious JavaScript, for example. And I mean, there's a lot of different tools out there to do a lot of the same stuff, or just to make your life a little easier when trying to do malware analysis. And it's very important to understand that, like, with all these different tools out there, you don't have to learn each tool from scratch, because they literally all work very similarly. So if you understand Ollie Debug, for example, and understand just kind of like the basics of using it and what you can do within it, then it'll be pretty easy to pick up IDA Pro and Ghidra. It's not like you have to go learn a whole different tool from scratch. So that's the good thing. But with malicious documents, I know in today's session we're discussing malware in general, but there's all different types of forms of malware. So there's those executables, so like an actual malicious file, or there's in documents, you can have malware within a PDF doc. You can have JavaScript within a PDF doc that can invoke certain processes and or even just invoke malware if you open up the PDF. There's macros within Word documents that can invoke certain scripts to conduct certain things on your machine or deploy certain malware on your machine. So that's how all this malware propagates. Whether it's through opening up a malicious link, it is opening up a malicious PDF document of a fake job requirement that you received from some random person on LinkedIn. I mean, these are all different ways that you could get malware on your system simply by just trying to open something that deploys this malware. And there's all different types of malware, like I mentioned earlier, but really it comes down to the executable or just opening up a document. And now I wanted to mention API calls. Okay, so when you're conducting static code analysis, one of the first things I learned, for example, was various API calls that a malware author can try to invoke in their malware, and it helps you understand what that malware is trying to do. So there's all different types of things like, you know, if there's code injection trying to be done, then you would see the potential create remote thread API call, or open process, or virtual alloc X. If they're trying to steal data, then you would get some of these. You would see some of this within the static analysis. If they're trying to do key logging within the malware, and I mentioned earlier, key logging is basically looking out for any keyboard clicks, and it's just recording every single keyboard click. Get async key state or set Windows hook X are key logging API calls that you would see. If the malware is trying to execute a program or execute its own malicious program, you would see win exec or shell execute or create process. Another big one is web interactions. So sometimes malware is being deployed on a machine that's actually not connected to the internet, and there's tons of examples there. But in order for the malware to take certain actions, it needs some type of web interaction. So it can open the internet on its own. It can open up an HTTP request, internet read file. I mean, all these are different API calls that you would literally see verbatim in the code, and automatically it's a red flag. So if you think about it, I mean, just getting an understanding of these various API calls and looking out for certain things, there's ways you can filter to look out for these specific API calls within those tools like Ollie debug or Ghidra, for example. And you can conduct static code analysis, static malware analysis, just by looking at some of the source code of the malware. Now, there's the second form of analysis, and this is dynamic analysis. This is the more dangerous version, because you are actually detonating the malware and executing it on a system to see what it can do. You're trying to look at the behaviors and characteristics by looking at what it's doing, not looking at how it's made up and how it's programmed. Now you're seeing what the program is actually going to do. So this technique involves you're running the malware on an isolated environment, and you want to see the behavior. This behavior is network behavior, file system behavior. So like if it's downloading certain files, or if it's removing certain folders in your file system, or it's renaming things, changes to the registry, any system changes whatsoever. This is all behavior, and that's what you're doing. You're trying to analyze in dynamic analysis. The reason why I say this technique is dangerous is because malware can break out of a confined environment and affect the host system. So we're going to discuss very soon how we conduct dynamic analysis and how we execute malware on a system. The way you do that is virtually on a virtual machine, but sometimes that malware can actually break out of a virtual machine. There's tons of well-written malicious software that can detect if it's being analyzed in a virtual environment or open in a virtual environment and break out of it and actually go to your host machine, your actual laptop itself. Just think of it as someone escaping from jail. So all different ways it can do that. And in this case, it can cause permanent damage to the system that the actual host system there. Also, if you do not do this correctly, so open up your virtual machine, conduct the correct network changes so that the malware does not have some of your network access, for example, or if you don't anonymize yourself properly, your IP, so your host IP can sometimes be captured by the malware author or the threat actor group. And actually, we've seen in many instances, malware researchers are targeted in future attacks by that same threat actor group or by by the malicious individual, for example. So if you're going to conduct dynamic analysis and you're going to execute malware on your system, you just have to make sure you're building a very safe environment for the malware. And so, it's very important to note that with dynamic analysis, there's a lot of ways that it can be pretty ineffective. So, for example, some malware has capability to detect if it's being run in a virtual environment, or if it's being analyzed, or sometimes it can detect various analysis tools present within the environment, or sometimes it can detect if it's being ticked through line by line. So, for example, if you're running the malware in a debugger and you're going line by line and looking at the various lines of code, the malware is sometimes designed to understand that it's being analyzed in that way and automatically shuts off. So does not run and you cannot analyze it anymore. So sometimes malware authors, actually many times malware authors are putting in these different defensive tactics so that they cannot be analyzed and they can continue doing what they have to do. Sometimes malware is also switched to time to run at a specific time on a specific date or specific time of the day. So it cannot be run at any other time. So that makes it pretty difficult as well. Other times, some malware is designed to run in specific conditions. So it's only designed to run on a Linux operating system versus Windows, or it's only in some cases like even the language of the system. So if it's a system that is set to the Chinese language, for example, it will not run on a system that is set on the English language, for example. So lots of different things that dynamic analysis can be pretty difficult or sometimes literally even ineffective. But as researchers, we have to understand how we can give the malware what it needs in order to actually conduct the analysis. So in some cases, if you understand that the malware is set to run at a specific time of day or a specific date, or with a specific language present or an operating system, you can give it those things and allow it to do what it has to do. And there's tons of different tools out there to conduct dynamic analysis. There's, if you want to monitor your interactions as the malware is executing, there's tools like Process Explorer, Process Monitor, NoRaben, for example. These are all different tools that are set to, when you are executing malware on the system, it is documenting and reporting on every single process or system change that's happening. And you can get all the logs of everything that happened within 5 minutes of the detonation, for example. And so that's a great way to get an understanding of what the malware is doing. Detect major changes, so red shot or auto runs, those are different tools to see what changed from right before you executed the malware versus a minute after execution or 5 minutes after execution. And you can compare and contrast the changes of the registry through that. You can monitor interactions on the network with tools like Wireshark or Fiddler. You can redirect network traffic through fake DNS or fake net. You can activate certain services that the malware needs so that you can move forward with the behavior and dynamic analysis through INET SIM. All different ways that you can utilize these different tools to get the most out of the dynamic analysis. And I keep mentioning giving the malware what it needs, because sometimes malware is designed to run with specific resources or things within the environment. So through that analysis, you can see that, hey, this malware needs internet connection in order to run. So I will put together a fake DNS request through fake DNS and allow like a simulated internet environment for the malware to move forward in its services. So a lot of different things you can do via dynamic analysis tools. Now, if you want to build a malware analysis environment, one thing that really helps is virtual machines. Okay, you're going to need a system that you can break, and I say that because sometimes, I mean, even if you have a old computer or a bunch of old devices that you want to try malware out on, or you can even spin up your own virtual machine. All these are different ways that you have to be very careful because, again, malware can escape and do certain things. So for example, let's say you have an old laptop that you want to try out malware on and execute on, but there's ways that the malware can escape that machine and propagate to the network that is on. So now potentially affecting the other devices that are on your home network or at your organization's network. So still always have to take this with caution. But if you want to do it via virtual machine, you can use VirtualBox, VMware, Parallels. All these are different free virtual machine technologies. And basically, once you download VirtualBox or VMware, you can download an operating system. So you can download like a Linux operating system or a free Windows operating system, download it and run it on the virtual environment. So now you have a virtual environment to conduct everything you need to do, and putting in the proper configuration and network safety. Your host machine will be safe, and everything you want to do can be done within your virtual environment. Or if you don't want to do it by sole operating systems, there are pre-built labs that you can download. So again, you use VirtualBox, VMware, Parallels, for example, and then you download things like Remnux, for example. So Remnux is a virtual environment that you can download onto the virtual machine software, and it comes pre-built with literally all the tools you need. I mean, Remnux is what I use personally. It comes with a free version of IDA Pro, Ollie Debug, Ghidra, all the different tools in the command line, all kinds of different ways to make it very easy for you. It's all pre-built and you can start right there. There's also Flare VM. That's a Windows-based malware analysis lab environment that you can download automatically. Definitely a pretty cool thing to do. But the cool thing about virtual machines, right? let's say you've downloaded it, and now you have your virtual machine running, and now you have a malware sample that you're executing in the virtual environment. You can take a snapshot of the virtual environment in its pristine state, meaning the state before the malware was executed, and you can revert back to that pristine state whenever you want. So let's say you execute the malware and it's very destructive and destroys your entire file structure, or um, you know, all kinds of different things that can happen via the, what the malware is doing or capabilities. You can, by the click of a button, revert back to the pristine state through that the virtual environment technology, the virtual machine technology, and go back to how it was right before you executed the malware, which is something you cannot do on a host machine or on your regular laptop, because once the malware is executed, it's going to be very hard to get back to where it was before it was executed. That's why I definitely recommend the virtual environment. But basically, once you do that, all you would need is a malware sample, and you can begin analysis, behavior analysis, and so on. So that can be really fun. So now that we discussed what malware is, we discussed types of malware, we discussed the different ways you can analyze malware, and we discussed building out an actual lab. Now I want to take a step back and kind of discuss just malware detection and removal and prevention, just in general, for any of you who just came to have an understanding of these three categories and what to do. So how do you detect whether your system or network is infected by malware, whether individually or just via your organization? Tons of different ways that you can get an idea of, hey, there might be malware on my system. If very slow or unresponsive PC, are you finding random folders in your file structure or different shortcuts inside folders that weren't there before? Unable to delete certain files, shutting down, you're having reboot issues. I mean, all these are different things that you could be seeing within your machine, and it could, raise the question, hey, there could be malware involved here. Now, removing malware. Now that you've detected, that the PC or the network or the Mac, for example, might have been affected by malware, it's very important to remove the system from the network, disconnect all internet and intranet activity. Like I mentioned earlier, sometimes malware needs internet connectivity or network connectivity in order to move forward in its processes. So if you automatically disconnect from internet, sometimes that can be all it needs to be removed. Do not connect external drives, whether it's USB drives or hard drives, just like that. That can spread malware. Like we mentioned with Stuxnet, it was literally just one USB drive that was plugged into one Windows machine in the entire nuclear facility, and look what happened. You can scan the PC with an updated antivirus program. In this case, I showed a screenshot of an open source antivirus tool called Clam Antivirus. Basically, any of you can just for free download Clam Antivirus via the terminal, if you're Windows or if you have a Linux command line, and you can conduct full antivirus scans on your entire machine within 5-10 minutes via a free program. That's pretty cool. Reboot the system, and you might even have to reformat the PC and to follow different prevention steps to remove malware from the system. And malware prevention. Now that you have removed the malware traces, follow a few recommendations to prevent such incidents in the future. So I know we're coming up close on time here, but we cannot be 100% secure against malware, and we cannot have 100% prevention against malware. That's impossible. So we can do what we can to defend against it, or lower the lower the probability of malware being able to affect the system, but we can never fully prevent it. So these are some of the ways that we can actually help to prevent as much as we can. And last but not least, I just wanted to show this last final slide of malware analysis across various teams and industries. So if you were to join any type of security role, you would probably fall under one of these teams here, because there are lots of different types of teams out there in security. And you might fall into one of these industries, and all of them. And I really thought about this, but literally all of them are going to be dealing with some type of malware analysis in some way. So, for example, a SOC team, a security operations team, or digital forensics incident response team, when they're responding to an incident that has to do with malware, they definitely have to have a pretty strong malware analysis, skill set and experience, because if they're in the middle of an incident, sometimes if a company does not have their own malware analysis team or malware research team, a SOC team or the digital forensics incident response team would need to understand how that works. Or a pen tester on the red team, they would have to understand how malware works, because sometimes they're actually writing malware themselves to try to penetrate through a network or a system for reporting, for reporting capabilities. So that being said, it's going to be very important that you at least have a fundamental understanding of what malware analysis is, what malware is in general, how it works, how to conduct basic analysis of it, and then you can get stronger in it over time. So I wanted to definitely note that there. But apart from that, those are the main things I want to cover in today's session. I hope you found it to be pretty beneficial. And like I mentioned early, I want to do like a second session sometime in the future, near future, hopefully, where I can actually do an analysis like in real time and show you all how that would work. That would be pretty fun. So look out for that at some point in the future. But I know we don't have tons of time. We have like 5 minutes left, but I wanted to leave the rest of time for Q&A, if that's okay with Jordan.
Yes. I do want to share my screen just really quickly before we lose some folks, and just highlight that we have a couple more events happening next week. Let's see if this will load. Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Awesome. So October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, so we have more events than usual. So Syed was talking about setting up a virtual machine. We have an event hosted by another one of our instructors happening on Tuesday, where he's actually going to walk through installing Ubuntu Linux, I believe. And then Syed is going to be back on next Wednesday, along with our senior career coach for cybersecurity, talking about cybersecurity certs. So I know we had some questions in the Q&A box around that topic. So I'll send these links in my recap email tomorrow, but we would love to see you there. All right, let's take some questions. There are many, many in the Q&A. I don't know if you can see that, Syed, but okay. Let's see, this one's from Jose. How would you recommend people practice cybersecurity skills like malware analysis, pen testing, etc.? Like sites like Hack the Box or Try Hack Me? Any additional recommendations?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I was going to say was like a Try Hack Me or Hack the Box. There's also WebGoat, which is through the Open Web Application Security Project. They have like a bunch of, already vulnerable web pages or applications that you can try to exploit, and you can get help or look at documentation, but they're already vulnerable, so that's pretty fun to do. So a lot of different ways you can do that there. And then when it comes to malware analysis, I mean, there's different ways that you can actually download your own malware samples, and then from there put together that research lab that I discussed, and then conduct that execution. It'll be a lot of fun.
That was a question that we got a couple of times, is like, where can I get malware to use for analysis? What do you recommend?
That's a hard one, because there's that's when it gets pretty dangerous. Personally for me, I've never just downloaded it from open source locations. There's some security research sites that have them for download. But for me, within organizations I've worked at, they have different malware samples that you can get. But I believe there's ways you can get it via just open source, like security research projects that have malware samples.
Awesome. Somebody asked what you do in your role at Amazon.
Yeah.
Are you
Amazon,
allowed to tell us?
Yeah. So I'm basically being a malware research engineer. I am helping to build systems for malware analysis. So building out those labs, like I mentioned, and then also conducting the research on the lab itself. So we get any type of malware that's seen on any environment within Amazon and the subsidiaries. We have to do analysis of what that malware's capability and characteristics are, and report back to various teams on how to defend against it.
Awesome. Got this question a couple of times. Can a keylogger record the inputs of a password manager like LastPass or KeePass?
Yeah, there are some keyloggers that can do that. Of course, LastPass and KeePass, they're designed in a certain way to help defend against some keyloggers. But like I mentioned early on, malware authors are constantly, conducting new things and evolving the way that they actually write their malicious programs. So sometimes they can even evade detection from something like LastPass and KeePass, for example, and a keylogger can actually record what's being typed out or auto input via the password manager. So it's something else.
That is terrifying. All right. Let's answer one certification question. Give them a little taste of our event next Wednesday. Given your own experience and perspective, which certifications are worth pursuing for practical or industry usage?
Yeah, so as a entry to intermediate level certification, I would always say Security Plus. It covers so many different domains of security. It's very, very important to get, and don't let anyone tell you that it's just entry level. It's actually covers enough to even help you have a good, strong understanding of like an intermediate level security concepts. So definitely great. There's also Certified Ethical Hacker, which is a great certification if you want to understand different types of malware, attack vectors, how they work. You get some basic pen testing skills and the training that they provide. So those are two really good certs I would recommend.
Awesome. When we first logged on, there were a few people in the chat saying that they were studying for Sec Plus. So good luck, everyone.
Good luck, everyone.
Let's see. I know we're over, but let's take just a couple more. My goodness, there's so many in here. If there's anything that you see popping up, Syed, feel free to.
Oh yeah, I'm looking. Let's see here.
We did have one around what sort of classes or kind of coursework is needed to replace, years of experience for cybersecurity. How can you get up to speed with cybersecurity skills in a shorter amount of time?
Yeah, honestly, I mean, there's all different types of programs, like training programs that you can be a part of. I mean, not to be biased or anything. I mean, there's always like different boot camps, especially Flatiron School that has various actual boot camps that you can join in, and you get a really strong experience of all different types of domains. But there's also other options like training on Udemy or Coursera. LinkedIn Learning has a lot of really good like intro to cybersecurity um, like courses. Um, Even like on YouTube, there's like for the Security Plus, there's something called Professor Messer, and he has all different types of videos and all kinds of concepts within cybersecurity that are really helpful. And it wouldn't take a lot of time. Like it would probably take like a few days to go through all the videos, but you'll get a pretty strong understanding. So those are some of the options you can have.
Awesome. And have you seen, obviously in your role as an instructor, have you seen folks with no kind of experience in IT landing jobs in cybersecurity?
Oh yeah. So yeah, especially like in my experience of Iron School, we have a lot of students come in with like no IT or tech background at all. And they come in, and once you're passionate and dedicated to learning and growing, I mean, some of the things that you see are like fascinating, just how some people are able to grasp certain things and really like figure out this is what they wanted to do this whole time. So they just move forward in it, and we see them. I mean, it's just wonderful to see them, land jobs and continue flourishing in their career. I mean, these are all things that we see all the time. So one thing to know is just like it's never too late. So just if you're interested in something, take a course on it, read up on it. It'll be worth your while.
Awesome. I think we will call it there. There's just no way we're going to get to all these questions, but it sounds like we may be preparing for a part two of this, which we will definitely communicate once we get that on the calendar. But until then, we hope to see you next week at our virtual events similar to this one. And if you are inspired to pursue a career in cybersecurity, and want to join Flatiron School, to do it, you can apply to our cybersecurity engineering course on our website. We have a rolling start dates every few weeks. So somebody just asked, how might that be communicated? It will be communicated. I have your email addresses in your registration, so we'll just shoot an email to everybody who have RSVP'd for this one to make sure you get information about the next one. And then, as I mentioned, you will receive the recording, the slides, and any other sort of recap materials tomorrow morning. So thank you so much for, I think there's been lots of conversations. There was a Discord server that was set up for people to connect about cyber. So really awesome to see that kind of cyber community happening here. Thank you so much, Syed, for sharing just like all this incredible knowledge. We really appreciate it. And with that, we will sign off for the night. Have a good one, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.